Welcome to Free to Speak, the New Zealand Free Speech Union podcast. If you enjoy the show, subscribe for uncensored conversations and free speech news from New Zealand and beyond.
Kia ora and welcome to Free to Speak. I'm your host today, Dane Giro. Today we're going to be speaking to National MP for Maungakeke, Greg Fleming. Greg Fleming is a speaker of Te Reo Māori. It's a language that he has learned as an adult. That's correct, isn't it?
It is indeed, yes. Yep, the recent learner.
Great. Now, I do not speak Māori. I probably have a bit of a better appreciation and understanding than most, or the average person, I would say, because I did work for many years on Māori TV productions. And when you're in an edit suite for hours and hours, you just pick up a lot of different words. Now, at the Free Speech Union, there's not too much opportunity to campaign on behalf of Te Reo Māori because there doesn't seem to be too many legal battles that we would sort of campaign on. But I do want to have this conversation and others like it because I believe, and we've talked about this a lot as an organization, that beyond the legal, there is a culture of free speech that we need to be fostering. And for me, a bit of generosity to Te Reo Māori would embody that. So it would be good just to hear your journey, really, how you came to the language, but maybe just, how you came to being an MP to start with, just so we can get a good picture of who you are, where you're from, and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Kia ora, Zane. Thanks for this. So I was born and raised on a small farm in the Wairarapa, or Waira. I think I can't remember how I used to say it back then, but it didn't sound like that. And there we go. That's the one. Yeah. Well, I was trained at Victoria University in Wellington, and got married after uni. Worked at a charity there, went and worked in business in London. I'm a chartered accountant by profession, still am a member of the institute. And when we came back from London, I went to start up a couple of small businesses. I was only a few months into that. Took this call from a couple who had just started an organisation called Parenting Place, or at the time it was known as Parenting with Confidence. They were looking for someone to come and help them do some fundraising and set up the business side of the charity. I wasn't interested initially, but after a couple of days of reflecting on it, I thought, well, this is probably something that I should do. I'll give it a year. Moved to Auckland, and life never got back on the track that I had intended. So I'd always thought that I'd be the person making the money in business and giving it to charitable organisations. Instead, I've been the one running the organisations and asking for the money. And it's it was a fantastic 25 years. I was at Parenting Place for about 3 or 4 years, then went off to start my first charity. It became sort of 10 or 12 charities we started over the years. Found myself eventually back at Parenting Place as the CEO, and then subsequent to that, thought, well, if I'm ever going to knock on the door of Parliament, now is probably when I should do it. Sort of just hit my early 50s, and doors opened in a way that I hadn't anticipated. And to be honest, if I was really honest, I was really hoping each door I knocked on, I was hoping wouldn't open. So I was pretty reluctant arrival at Parliament a couple of years ago, but it's actually turned out to be overall a very very rewarding experience, and one which now, having been there for a couple of years, I realise, I think I can actually contribute to this place, and it doesn't have to make me a worse version of myself. But they were the two reservations I'd always had about coming here. So many of the roles that I'd had and so much of the work that I was doing had me interfacing with Parliament that I had been very much put off by the culture of the place, and B, the inefficiency of the place. I remember having a conversation with Sir Bill English about a year before I put my hand up to be considered as a candidate. And he asked me what my reservations were. When I said those two things, he referenced himself in terms of someone who was here for 30 years and seemed to live pretty well, which he certainly did. As in terms of who he became and who he was and is today, but also just in terms of getting stuff done. He said to me, look, yes, Parliament is an unusual beast. It's complex systems, but if you apply yourself well, he said, which you will, Greg, you learn the situation, you build relationships, and you will actually get stuff done. And he's been right on both those accounts. So yeah, the first couple of years have not been anywhere near as terrifying or soul destroying as I had. As I had had concerned. My
So sorry, I'll just jump in. I don't
yeah.
really have that experience. I would have been extremely cynical, and I've said this before becoming part of the Free Speech Union, because I
Mm.
didn't know how much change a group like this could make. But we have made change,
Yeah. Yes.
and brought a lot of attention to issues. But it does come down to the individual, I think. It's like,
Mm.
look at Stephen Joyce. I mean, you
Yeah.
can't say that Stephen Joyce didn't affect change when he got in there. He just had that mindset, and he was able
That's
to
right.
do it.
Yep, he really did. Yeah, and in his case, he had the added the construct of coming in at the beginning of a 3-term government, and by being a list MP and being so well connected within the party, he was given a place of responsibility straight away. He was able to focus entirely on just the ministerial responsibilities, and yeah, I mean, what he did was, I'm still in awe of the number of things that he did, and I just wish that he had longer here. But you're right. Yes, it comes down. It does. It absolutely comes down to the individual. It comes down to the kind of mindset that they bring here. Are they going to get distracted by the actual politics of the place, or are they actually just going to see the changes that they can affect, the work that needs to be done, and just get on with that? And I guess I had seen that in watching the experiences of Stephen and others, and Bill English and so forth. But the thing that surprised me is I guess I had thought you could probably only do that if you were a cabinet minister, or at least a minister. But what I've discovered is you can actually do stuff from the backbench as well. So it's what's been encouraging.
I was going to get to this a bit later, but now we're on it, I might talk about it a bit now. In terms of your electorate and it's sort of broadened, hasn't it? There were recent
Hmm.
changes, is that correct?
Yeah, yep. They gave us back in August Panmure. So now the electorate
Mm.
runs from the State Highway 20 in Hillsborough across to and including Panmure. So we have a lot of that waterfront down there as well. So yeah, it's a very diverse electorate and
Yeah.
of a good size. Yeah.
So you'd have a lot of, because Panmure, when I was growing up, because I was brought up in Otahuhu, it was still quite a very working class. I'd say it may have gentrified in parts, but it would still have that element in there. And then Greenland, you probably couldn't really call working class. So you're looking after a extremely diverse.
Massively, yeah. Yeah, there was a
Yeah.
moment during the campaign that really hit home was I was down on Waitangi Road in Oranga, so down the bottom of Onehunga, so sort of just between Onehunga and Penrose, and I was having a conversation with a couple of families who were in one of the Kāinga Order estates there, and just unpacking their life story with them and seeing how I might be able to help if I became an MP. And I mean, you imagine what their stories were like. I mean, the cards that these people had been dealt in life were just horrendous. One of them was an immigrant from Somalia, and I mean they were just barely existing. And then 10 minutes later, I found myself on Maungakea Avenue, where you can't buy a home for less than about 7 or 8 million. And these, I mean, I could I could have driven between these two places in about 6 or 7 minutes, and I represent both these communities, which is it's sobering. It's a privilege to represent that all of these communities. But it's certainly a poignant and ongoing reminder of the complexities of New Zealand society. So when they gave me Panmure, they certainly gave me it's certainly a diverse community. Like you've got you've got some areas that would be quite enthusiastic about my party's politics. But I think from an electoral point of view, it certainly hasn't helped me. I think it was 27% National Party support at the last election, that particular area. So I'm going to have to work extra hard to try and retain the electorate this November.
Well, the other thing about, we have the Stephen Joyces and who are sort of, Transmission Gully and all that stuff and all the big show, but just being someone people felt, if people felt you were accessible and they can just speak to you, even if not every problem is going to be solved instantly. The fact that they can just, that's what I like about that sort of localized democracy. Like the fact
Mm.
that people can, make a date and sit down with you and talk. I think it goes a long way to healing. Like I think it's a really important aspect here. Like someone that is accessible and can hear people, has got to be a big part of this.
Yeah, 100%. So one of the many different complex issues you can imagine I'm working on in my electorate is around the neighbours of a large development that's happening on the south side of the Ellerslie Racecourse along Ladies Mile, and yeah, a number of homes have been. It does appear to be, well, they've certainly been detrimentally impacted, and their argument is that is from the effects of the development, and that's, I now find myself in this mediation space essentially between the developer and these residents. But there was a story in Sunday Start Times this week, in which the reporter had come with me as I visited some of the various homes last week and held a community meeting, and including with the CEO of the development company. And there was my favorite quote in it, my most rewarding quote in it was when this one householder said, Greg came into my house and he was genuinely empathetic, and then she goes, and I felt really heard. And I was
Mm.
like, oh, those 4 words, yes, like that's, if there's,
Yeah.
that's exactly what you're saying.
Mm.
Yes, obviously the most important thing I can do is to actually, sort people's problems. But that's not always, well, seldom is that within my control. But them being heard, that is something that's in my control. Like if I'm genuinely engaged in the issue, if I'm available and then I genuinely listen, well, that's all on me. So that when I came into this job, I'm like, that's definitely what I want to do. And I would say that when I look back over the hundreds of cases that we have dealt with, and everything from it was around housing, particularly Kāinga order, immigration, WINS, MOE, so on and so on. So a lot to do with Auckland Transport and Auckland Council issues. And I would say we've probably been able to deliver a satisfactory solution in probably 2/3 of those cases.
Mm.
So there's certainly no end of them. Yeah, I was talking about it with a
Yeah.
colleague over breakfast this morning, a much more experienced MP, just about how many of these cases come up, just hundreds and hundreds of them, and you can't get to all of them, but it's
Mm.
I think it's definitely a highlight of the job, being able to work on those local cases.
Yeah, I think I was saying in one of the podcasts we did last week that like there's no empirical evidence that say hate speech laws work. There's still no empirical evidence, but there is empirical evidence that dialogue reduces radicalization.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
really interesting. So if people feel they can vent, it is going to take the steam out. It's going to take the bitterness out, and I think that's a really important aspect of free speech that people sort of
Yeah, it
sort of
is.
don't grasp enough. Like
Oh,
people
one
need to be heard. It doesn't matter who they are either.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and I would say that the single biggest challenge that we have in terms of um, uh, fostering or refostering a really constructive public square is for people to be genuinely heard. So when people are sitting behind their keyboards, they're not actually listening to each other, and because it actually takes a form of relationship. It takes careful, curated conversation for people to actually genuinely heard. The most important, helpful book that I've read in recent years, and I read it again when I came into politics, and I've read it again subsequently, and encouraged as many of my colleagues as possible to read it. I don't know how successful I've been on that, but it must be time for me to send it around again. It's called the Righteous Mind, and the byline is Why Good People Are Divided by Religion and Politics, and it's by an American anthropologist called Jonathan Haidt.
Oh, yep, yeah.
Haidt.
He's
Yeah.
a name that a lot of our supporters will know. Yeah.
Yeah, outstanding. And this book was his. This is the one that made him famous. It's essentially the contemporary version of his doctorate work, and he's looking at the essence of morality. So
Mm.
what is morality? He breaks it down, distills it down to sort of 6 different um, uh, um, reactions or responses that people have to various issues, and then he likens it to a sort of a 6-channel soundboard, and different people have different channels up and down, and in laying all of this out, essentially through understanding that people hold different views. That doesn't make them immoral. It doesn't make them evil. It doesn't make them disgusting. It just means that they have a different set of moral emphases. But if you can understand that framework, then that gives you the foundation from which to be able to listen to them carefully and actually hear what it is that they are saying, and perhaps even more critically, you can then speak to them or with them in a way that they actually hear what you're saying. I was on a select committee, I think yesterday, and someone said someone quoted, I forget what it was. Anyway, but the point they made was that the art of, I know what it was. Yeah, it was the Minister of Mental Health, Matt Ducey, in the caucus room last night. We're having a policy discussion, and he said that one of the foundational tenets of counselling is that what you say is not defined by what you actually communicated, but by how you were heard. And so the point that he was saying is that actually the responsibility is on you to make, as the communicator, to make sure that you're actually being heard properly. And yeah, I thought about that. I thought about that all night. I love that kind of stuff because I now find myself in arguably the most contentious square of all, where people are just yelling at each other, and yet it doesn't have to be like this. This is what I'm absolutely convinced that if we can actually listen to ata whakaaro, to actually carefully listen to one another, which begins with actually listening to ourselves and understanding ourselves really well, then we can actually have constructive communication. But koe te moi moia, that's the dream. Yeah.
Well, on the marae, there's a hell of a lot of talk. And just not too far from where I am here, because I'm down in the Manawatu, there's a little township called Whakaronga.
Yeah.
And apparently that was a meeting place. It's like, it's not called speak. The town's called listen.
It's literally called Whakaronga, actual places.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's not too
That's
far
very
from
cool.
here. So that's,
Yeah.
I like that,
Well,
my father-in-law told me that story. We're driving
right,
past.
that's great.
I hope
Yeah.
it's true.
Well, Wanaka is actually that because Ngāi Tahu don't pronounce so the NGs become Ks. So what Wanaka in the dialect that's used in Te Reo Māori across the rest of the country would actually be Wananga. And so it's called. So in other words, it is a place of dialogue. The actual town is. So yeah.
Because that gets used for, kura is school, but that's a place of learning as well. Is that
Yeah. Kura is specifically a school, but kura is a type of wānanga. So a wānanga is really any kind of assembly where you're coming to learn and listen carefully. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, synagogue, because I'm Jewish, that means assembly too.
Right.
Yeah, like place for people to come and everything. So yeah. So well, let's get on to your journey in Te Reo Māori. So what took you there? I mean, the charity stuff is really interesting to me. So it was the charity stuff that took you there, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So my first interaction with it was a guy called Dr. Samuel Carpenter. So he did his postgraduate work in the area of what the history of the treaty and what brought that about in New Zealand. In the process, he did a lot of work around a guy called Henry Williams, who, for listeners who aren't aware, Williams was the founding missionary of the Church Missionary Society. He arrived in 1823. He spent pretty much the first 15 years really getting to know all of the chiefs, building relationship with them. Started schools and obviously churches and the like. Became an expert in Te Reo Māori, and actually was part of the group that was petitioned the British government to have a formal agreement with the iwi New Tiruni, and so he was the one who actually translated the treaty at Waitangi, not to Tiriti or Waitangi, and it was so Sam gave me a biography of Henry Williams that sort of was the first seeds that were laid, and then those seeds eventually began to take root, and well, many years later, sort of seven to 8 years later, I was sitting in the back of a conference hall of one of the first charities that I'd started, and we had a guy called Dr. Alistair Rees who likewise had done his postgraduate work in that space, and he told a story of Aotearoa of New Zealand that I hadn't really heard told in that way before, and it just something completely shifted in my heart, and I think that seed that had been planted all those years before and sort of been threatening to burst into life came through. Fast forward a few months, I found myself, maybe a year actually later, I found myself back at Parenting Place, and there was a friend of mine that I really wanted to get back on Worship Board, a lady called Te Waka McLeod. She had lived in Auckland for 7 years, moved back to Taranaki, and I wanted her to come back, and she said to me that she wouldn't come back because the reason that she had gone home was because in Taranaki she could be genuinely who she was, fully as Māori, in other words, in speaking Māori, and the tikanga, or the culture of the way that she did things, being fully Māori, and she'd never been able to do that in Auckland. And so as much as she wanted to work with me and loved the vision that I had for where we're going to take Parenting Place, she couldn't come back to that. So I said to her, well, what about we change this place so that you can be that person? And she looked at me and said, Greg, you have no idea what you're talking about. And I said to her, yeah. But I said, you remember that crazy dream that you had? So I go back sort of 14 years before this. She'd come to me wanting way back when we were working together at the beginning of another charity. She'd come to me one morning. She said, I had a dream last night. You were speaking in fluent Te Reo Māori in front of a whole group of Māori leaders, and I said to her, wow, what did you had for dinner? And I so reminded her of that dream, and she was like, yeah, okay, well, let's give it a go. So she moved up from Taranaki the following month, and I said to her, well, this is you came here on an understanding. What should we do? So she said to me, well, and to begin with, Greg, I really want us to run our hui in a Māori way, and that just simply means that we're going to start with mihi and karakia, do waiata, and it'll build, really will build relationship. And so I need you to as the leader, as the CEO, you need to start. And she goes, so here's something you need to learn. So away I went, and it was, it's pretty painful. I
could see you're
man.
going back there.
Oh man, it was bad. So we had our staff meetings at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, and we'd bring all of the Auckland crew together, and then from the other offices around the country, we'd zoom them in. And I found myself, I've always been, reasonably comfortable, very comfortable in front of an audience, and yet at 9:45 on a Tuesday morning, I felt my pulse to start to increase, and I was like, ooh. And so I'd get up there, 10 o'clock would start, and tēnā koutou, and after about half an hour, after about six months, one of my two ICs came to me and said, that was a really good meeting this morning. This is actually starting to feel quite natural, isn't it, Craig? And I said, yeah. No, it's actually, it is just getting better week by week. He looks at me and he goes, because that, like, for the first 3 months, it was just painfully awkward. I was like, you're telling me, dude? Oh. But I'm so pleased I had to go through that experience, because it just gives me such empathy for others who are in that space. And the reality of it is that's where most New Zealanders who are saying, hey, I want to be able to walk a bit more in those spaces. I'd love to be able to start to use a bit more of the language. I want to feel more comfortable at home within these kinds of cultural spaces, and begin to incorporate them a bit into place, like what you were mentioning before in terms of just what you naturally pick up. But it gives me real empathy for what they're going through, because it really is awkward. I mean, you're literally learning a new language. You're literally learning a new way of being, and within that, there's all kinds of self-doubts that come in, particularly because there's this, I think, this underlying sense of like, oh my goodness, this is the language and this is the original language and culture of New Zealand. I'm a New Zealander. I probably should know some of this stuff, but I don't, and that makes me feel really inadequate. And I think that's, that is part of what we wrestle with in terms of the gut reactions that you get from people to these kinds of things. But anyway, so that all carried on. We then started teaching the staff Te Reo Māori, those who wanted to learn it. So we had massive uptake. We started giving people leave time during the week. We formed a relationship with Te Wānanga Aotearoa and began to operate classes in our function rooms downstairs there in Green Lane in Auckland, and began to invite other community groups in. We started helping other charitable organisations and commercial organisations begin to go on there, what we called haidinga, which literally just means journey. So haidi is to go, and you put that ngā on the end, it makes the noun of the verb. So they're going on this journey, and that for us was how we would refer to this journey that we were going on in terms of reshaping the organisation out of with an understanding of Te Ao Māori, out of a Māori world. Not surprisingly, a number of people who were wanting to pursue Reo Māori and a Māori world started to increasingly apply for positions within the organisation, and so that becomes a self-fulfilling thing. And then they just carried on for several years, and so many fantastic things came out of it. Lots and lots of speakers. The reshape the sort of the old. Sometimes it's funny now. I reach for words, and it's Māori words that come to mind. I was about to say ko te āhua o te rangapu. That just the sense of the feeling of the organisation began to shift. And then another thing that came from it, ultimately, I won't bore you with all the details, but eventually emerged a wānanga. So it's called Te Wānanga Oihorangi. So the place of learning brought down from the sky, and it's a faith-based, it's a faith-based immersion college that delivers now a bachelor's degree as of this year in Te Reo Māori. So it's out in Waitakere in West Auckland, in conjunction with Laidlaw College, which is a private college out there. And this is our third year of operating, and it's it's going wonderfully. In fact, one of my own children is in the third year there, so he's now a very competent Reo Māori speaker, and from that, his part-time job is he's a sports commentator with Māori television, which adds another whole dimension to the family conversation.
I've got a good friend that. Yeah, well, I got a good friend that was because I used to do a show called Ngāti NRL. I don't know if you know of that show, but it was a big hit on Māori TV for many years. Well, it was a great show. Like, being from Otahu, I love rugby league, and this was like a dream job. So I was post-directing this show, and we were following young Māori and Pacific Island hopeful, league players. Often some of them were 16 and stuff, because the systems over in Australia, like they'll put them in a new school at 13 over there. They'll say to their parents in Otara, look, move over. We'll move the lot of you over. He'll go to the school. He'll be in this, and he'll be in the feeder club to the Roosters eventually. They really they start that young. It was quite fascinating, and Te Arahi Maipi would do the voiceover, and he'd do a lot of commentary. And so, when I say that I was picking up lots of, words, kupu, like if every show would have a couple of games in it. So a try, piro, so I was getting all of those,
That's awesome.
being games that they were repeating a lot. So I was going, okay, now I'm getting this. I'll tell you another thing that happened to me that I want to share too. I have written about this in a piece for Stuff a while back on the language. And that was, I was given a couple of, this is back when we had DV tapes, like it wasn't even, digital yet. And the producer said, I want a 20-second sound, like a grab, we would call it, like a sound grab from Tariana Turia, and I'm like, okay, but I had 2 hours of footage to look at, and I was like, oh, okay, well, so I got to look through all of this of just a talking head of her talking to get 20 seconds out of. And my attitude to Māori politics and everything at the time I wasn't hostile or anything, but I guess I probably had I'd say what would probably be quite a standard view of like, our country's great. I mean, is there much to complain about? You're okay. That sort of idea.
Yes.
Not
Yeah.
not really racist or anything, but just a bit, oh, come on, guys, everything's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sort of
Yeah.
vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I was watching this, and you know, I'd only encountered her in 10-second grabs or sound
Right.
bites and
Yeah.
things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I never, and so I listened to the complete 2 hours, and it completely changed my
Yeah.
worldview,
Yeah.
and really opened me up into the Māori experience and some of the grievances
That's brilliant.
and some of the
Wow.
development, and also the entrepreneurship
Mm-hmm.
that was going on within
Yeah.
Māori that I don't think people really
Mm.
appreciate. And I did read afterwards, actually, that Māori and Jews are the two most entrepreneurial
Re-
people per capita in the world.
That's awesome.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, but the tragedy of that story is that I only had they wanted 20 seconds. And it's like, and I thought, well, just put the whole thing
Yeah.
up there.
Yeah.
I mean, so many people would have a different
Yeah.
experience if they heard it like
Yeah.
this. But we weren't doing that. But we sort of are now with podcasts and
Yes.
everything.
Yeah. That's
But at
the
the
key.
time,
Yeah.
we weren't
Yeah.
really doing that. But we do have that opportunity. That's the thing with the internet, isn't it? Because a lot of people say, "Oh, it's a bad place, it's a dark place," but it's actually de-radicalizing a lot of people. I think it's giving them access to people like this and their worldview.
Yeah. You got it. Yeah. Yep. It's like any new technology. It's how it's used, right? Yeah. It's like people. This goes back to the earlier part of our conversation around Parliament and politics. There's nothing inherently wrong with this place. It's just made by the people who are here.
Mm.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, yeah. And there would be some people that would think, well, I just keep my head down and coast through, and I'm going to have a good. There would be those people,
There would be.
who would treat it like a prison
Yeah.
sentence and
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
don't try to be top dog, just sit in the
Yeah.
pocket, everything will be
Yeah.
fine. But and others who are like, I think, yeah, like a
Mm.
Joyce, who are like, I'm here to make
Mm.
change.
Yep.
I'm going to do that, and that's who they are. So we got a lot of uplift from you talking about the Te Reo journey, but learning a language
Yeah.
is hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there would have been some pretty miserable days.
Oh my goodness, and still are. I mean, I still just doubt
Mm.
myself all the time. I mean, yesterday I was speaking in the House on the Prime Minister's statement. So it's a time limited debate. So I get my 5 minutes, and I as I go to get to my feet, I'm still second guessing myself as to whether I'm going to speak in Te Reo Māori, and if so, when, and da 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 da. I had a moment at the end of last year, I think it was the Ngāti Paoa settlement. So they're one of the iwi from Tamaki Makaurau, so from the Great Auckland area, and I had the privilege of speaking at their third reading, and I just determined I'm going to speak in Te Reo Māori. Out of respect for them, and because I do believe we need the way that we grow a language is to use it, and we need to hear it more. But speaking in front of a gallery that's packed with there's going to be heaps of native speakers there, and I just had to talk myself through. Go, come on, Greg, just do this. You can do this, and that's nearly 2 years in where I've spoken heaps of time in Te Reo Māori, but it's just that constant second guessing. Oh, and in that particular instance, I had actually ended up writing out my speech, and I'm like, all right, here we go. And then the speaker changed just before I came in. So the person sitting in the chair, the presiding officer, and the one that came in is a guy called Greg O'Connor, and he's a real stickler for members not reading their speeches. And so I thought, oh no. Oh, well, maybe he tohu, as in like this is a sign. And so I just folded the speech, put it away, got to my feet. E te mangai o te whare, nōku te maringa nui ki atu ki konei, and away I went, and it just flowed, and I spoke for 5 minutes, and understand, and I had nothing but encouraging feedback from people, even up at Waitangi last week. There was someone who was turned out had been in the gallery, and they said to me, "Oh, yeah, I was there when you gave that speech, and we so appreciated speaking in the Reo Māori." There was not a hint of judgment, and I'm sure my speech would have just been filled with grammatical errors and but there was nothing other than just thanks and encouragement. It's just and But it is. Yep. No, every day I find myself learning. There's always new kupu to learn, and new structures to go back over. But the biggest one is just the confidence to use it.
The one I think about, because I read biblical Hebrew, and I have like led services and done stuff like that. The one that gets me, which I think people are quite harsh on, is pronunciation. And like some people can be quite tough on pronunciation. But when we're young, we have a language, our mother tongue. Literally,
Yep.
our mother will speak to us and teach us, mainly. And our mouths actually do shape
100%.
to that
Yes.
language.
Yep.
And so and I really don't like it when people come down hard on things like this, because that's when the person who probably was open to learning clams up,
Yep.
shuts up,
Yep.
doesn't want to share anymore,
Yep.
and it's physiological, I believe, because I went to drama school way
There you
back,
go.
and I know
Yeah.
I know it is.
Yeah.
And it's something like Hebrew. If you go the in the throat, not everyone can just do
No.
that. You gotta learn that.
Yep.
I'd never leap on someone for not getting that right
No, and
first off.
in my experience is that really is the exception for someone who does that. The pronunciation police are very few and far between. I certainly my experience 99% of the time has been the one that I was referencing before, which is people just focus on the positive and just really really appreciate it. I had that years ago when I learned French all the way through my teen years, and then lived with a French family in Tahiti one summer and the like. And it always people already said to me, "Oh, the French are so rude and da 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 about them." All when you go to France, all they want to do is speak their language. I'm like, really? Imagine that they're in France and they want to speak French. How unreasonable. Anyway, so first time I went to France, I had totally, I was even in Paris. I was in Paris, where apparently the worst, the enforcers are, and I had nothing but just appreciation for the fact that I was actually trying to speak their language. 99% of the time, they'd let me mangle their language for 3 or 4 sentences at most, and then switch to English. But there was nothing other than appreciation. So I do. That's maybe I'm the exception. I'm not sure, but in both the French setting and the Māori setting, I have found overwhelmingly that when you make the effort to actually use the language, and then it's met with appreciation, not judgment.
Mm.
Mm.
Well, I know we briefly talked about it before we kicked off the interview, but I do want to talk about the way forward for Te Reo Māori. There was a controversy about the names of government departments, which had been primarily in Māori, with maybe like the English as the second, and that did get swapped around. Was that New Zealand first that did that, or was
Yes,
that
yeah, and I
national?
think it
I
was.
can't
No,
quite remember.
that was part of the coalition agreement from New Zealand first.
Mm. Yeah, that was a topic that got a lot of heat, and it's the perfect story for the
Yeah,
media,
sure
isn't it?
is.
It's the kind
Yeah.
of they kind of really gravitate towards. But I tended to feel that both sides were getting that wrong. On the right, or just the people that are sort of maybe not even the right, but just not sympathetic to Māori language being out there in the world. You can live with the title of a government department. Your language is not being robbed, taken. It's not a takeover,
No,
a hostile
that's
takeover.
right.
It's one thing. So I thought that was a bit sad, and just so ungenerous, isn't it? To me, it's just so ungenerous.
Well, it is. I mean, the one. I do have a little bit of sympathy around where it had gone in some places. There was a case. I mean, my wife has studied the Reo Māori quite a bit, and she and I worship at Mihinari Church, so Te Anna Tapu, so Māori Anglican Church, which is a bilingual church, so she can follow along most of those things. She really wrestled with literally I forget which government department it was, but there was one day she was trying to reach out to government department, and she literally couldn't work out which government department she was talking to or supposed to be talking to. And that was maybe 2.5 years ago, and that was a moment where I was like, yeah, okay, we're probably losing the essence here. It's actually really important. First and foremost, I mean, the primary purpose of language is communication, right? I mean, language does a lot more than just communicate. It carries stories and identity, and which is why I'm such a proponent of seeing the regeneration and flourishing of Te Reo Māori. But first and foremost, the language is communication, and when those two aspects conflict, the first one has to take preeminence. So when you're a government department and people actually don't know who you are, what you do, then you've probably got the wrong name. And that could apply for if you didn't have a great English name. So, if the health department, it's one thing for it to be called, what was it, Te Whatu Ora, but if it was called, the New Zealand Department of Life Outcomes, you'd probably want to go, okay, we need to reset this. This should be called the health department. So I do think we'd gone, the things had gone too far one way, and I do think there was an element of that which was from those whose approach to seeing the language grow is, we're going to force this on people, and that's I'm not a fan of that approach at all. For me, I was generously invited into a space and enticed into learning this language. And that's the approach. That's the only approach that I want to take with people. That's why, for example, I'm not supportive of making Te Reo Māori compulsory at schools, for example, or compulsory in the workplace or anything. It should always be an invitation to people.
Yeah, see, I'm quite for
Right.
that.
Well, maybe
we could talk about
maybe
that.
this is where free speech union comes in as well.
Well, see, because the point you just made about not having that clarity in the communication aspect, that sort of goes to my critique of the left on it, because maybe it was cart before the horse, because a department in Māori isn't normalizing the language. I think they think it's normalizing the language. We're seeing more Māori. No, it's about speaking it. It's about learning it. You know what I mean? So this is tokenism.
Well, it is,
actually.
and the problem with
It's
tokenism is that it actually destroys both things, because you don't, in the process, you not only do you not actually end up advancing the cause of growing the language, but you end up making opponents out of people who otherwise might have been invited and enticed along a journey of discovery. And in other words, it's almost the equivalent of giving someone a vaccine. You inoculate them against the thing, against the other thing. Another way you can take it, you give them an allergy to it. I had this with so many of my friends who over the space of while I was going on my own hiding or journey, they were increasingly, I was a close family members, and increasingly interested in what was going on. And I found myself having conversations around street signs in Te Reo Māori, or breaking down kupu and da. And then was around about 2017, 2018 thing, we started to see more and more of it. And then we had that period and unfortunately it was a government-led thing. It was really, really unfortunate. But we did have that period from 2020 to 2023 where it felt to me like in a number of contexts the language was weaponized. And I saw the unfortunate fruits of that in the allergic reactions from these family friends of mine who had just prior to that, as I say, started to, at the first time in their life, be interested in going on a journey with Reo Māori. They were now like, oh my goodness, this Maori's being shoved down my throat and da 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 da. And for me, it just, more than anything, it just spoke of a lack of patience and a lack of wisdom around how you regenerate a language. You can't regenerate a language by having a government force it on people. Language can only be regenerated by actually appealing to people's hearts. That's been my experience, and that's the only approach that I ever want to take with people.
Well, it's forced on people, but in a very symbolic way, in a way that's not really going to achieve what people think it's going to do anyway. That's
right.
So it's like you're spoiling goodwill for very little gain.
Yeah, it's exactly the sad thing.
That's the issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like in Israel, Hebrew, people picked up Hebrew, but a lot of Jews didn't have a common language. That was a difference. I guess people coming in from different, parts of the of the world, and some would have been, speaking Arabic and Spanish and all sorts of different, French and all sorts of different, German, Um, so they needed that common language. There's an aspect there. We don't have that here. We've got a common tongue. That's tricky because Māori can speak English, and New Zealand, or Pākehā, non-Māori can speak English. That's an issue. So for me, I don't know how we get bilingual without our children learning it, as part of their schooling. Now, the compulsion aspect there, uh, I could live with, because, if you're bilingual, it does wonders for the brain. You can pick up a third language, a fourth language. Like it actually, it's a great exercise to be able to have that in terms of learning and your ability to learn more. So there are only positives even beyond a specific language. Now, some people can say, "Oh, well, learn Chinese then. That's going to be the way of the future," or learn this or learn that. It's like, yeah, actually, because that's the thing that gets me. It's like, when people say, "Well, this is a dying language," why would you let any language die?
But
You know?
yeah,
I mean,
I hear.
what
Yes, no, I
mm,
hear that. Although the reality of it is that we've got thousands, tens of thousands of years of human history in which the vast majority of languages that have existed no longer do. So the
yeah,
reality of it is, of the rise and fall of civilizations and the evolution of people and their societies, languages do come and go. And so I think within that we also do need to be realistic society as to what we're aiming for. And so, I mean, I myself, use that term as well, bilingual society. But I mean, I don't when if I sort of witty te rā whakaaro, if I really pull that thought apart, what is my vision that in 2 generations from now, most New Zealanders are able to operate in both English and Te Reo Māori. Well, yeah, I mean, that would be amazing. In terms of, is that realistically what I'm aiming for? Probably not, insofar as just even the realities of ongoing immigration, with our birth rate being what it is, we are going to continue to, and the very nature of part of being a New Zealander is that you go and spend a chunk of your life living overseas, and most of us have done it. I can't see why subsequent generations might continue to do it with that kind of continual mix. I think we've got to be realistic about that's an unattainable future. I think even as I'm a natural born optimist, and I love to be strategic and all the rest, but hopefully I'm also realistic enough to say, well, that's not possible. So what is it that we're aiming for? And I think it is. I think what we can realistically aim for is to have a significant number of New Zealanders. I don't know whether that's a third of New Zealanders who 20 years from now are comfortable with having conversations in Te Reo Māori, and or wrapping that into their regular exchanges. I mean, for me, a simple aim is just to hear it more and more in the House of Parliament. At the moment, there's probably only half a dozen MPs who could actually get up and speak for several minutes in Te Reo Māori. I would love to see that grow. Just with this, with the significant role that House plays from all of New Zealand, hearing it more spoken there would be great. But I'm not imagining a future where every member in the House, or the overwhelming majority, can converse in Reo Māori. I don't see, in terms of my study of language revitalisation and my love of history, I just don't see that as being achievable. And I do think it's really important that we're realistic about what it is that we're aiming for, because otherwise we will end up choosing to go down roads that lead us to, for example, renaming all of our government departments in with names that the vast majority of people don't even understand.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, but I think my own, and I've thought about this a lot, like my own argument against my position is that, well, who are the teachers? You
Yeah.
know, you're talking about tens of
Yes,
thousands of
you are.
people, aren't
Yep.
you? That would be required to teach everyone from Cape Reinga right down to the
Yep.
bluff.
Correct.
Like,
Yeah.
you would need a lot of people, and this isn't, if they're learning it the way they're learning English, um, this is a lot of learning. This is a lot of learning, and it may,
So to that
may,
extent, I'm a big one of my favourite parts of my job as an MP is I get to sit on the Māori Affairs Select Committee, and the favourite part of that, well, there's two favourite parts. One is I love treaty settlements because treaty settlements actually give iwi and hapu the opportunity to pursue genuine tino rangatiratanga, which is literally just means the ability to actually be able to really look after yourselves. I'm not talking about separate systems and the like. I was meaning, these so wealthy families in New Zealand have tino rangatiratanga in terms of the fact they've got their ability to be able to look after themselves. And that's what I'm look for with iwi and hapu, and that's what treaty settlements enable those communities to do. And the other thing about treaty settlements is that they take our eyes off the past. Not we don't forget about the past. At the end of the day, we're all that we don't learn our history, we're doomed to repeat it. But rather, as a nation, I do think we need to be looking forward more. So that's my number one. I love treaty settlements. But number two is the language revitalisation entities. Now, in my opinion, we have too many. We have 4 or 5, and I'd love to see them come together into either 1 or 2. But what I do love is seeing the fruit of their work, particularly in the home. And so, in my opinion, one of the 2 most impressive of those entities is called Te Mātāwai, and their focus is primarily on regenerating the language in the home. So making Te Reo Māori the primary language of the family, because as you were saying before, that's where language is first and foremost learned. And I love that. So I've got much more a focus on how as a government we can help support those kinds of contexts, rather than looking at schools, which again speak to me of a sort of a government mandated approach, and thou shalt all learn Te Reo Māori, like that. For both in terms of how to turn people off a language and not be very effective.
Well, I think the sad thing there too is that, being a member of a minority community myself, it's like if people, and this is a big reason why I oppose the hate speech laws, if people, and you can see what's happening in Australia, if people think these things are happening if they're driven by a minority, that can create a lot of resentment. Like the majority can really sort of, push back. And I think we can see that with things like language. I still think it's quite ungenerous, but it's not always rational or thought through. But there is that sort of compulsion as an issue. Like even like the treaty, when people talk about the treaty and the workplace, it's like, well, where's the neutrality here? Do I have to feel one way or the other and everything? I mean, I've had production companies that will talk about the treaty, then, and they say, are you fine with it? And I'm saying, I'm fine with it. And then day one, it's never brought up again.
No.
they never go there again.
No.
It's just a question they ask at the interview. And then I think, well, that's kind of disappointing as well. But but for me, compulsion is an issue. Like, I think there's a natural instinct in people to push back when they're told what to do that,
Yep.
And but my vision of, I think you're winning me over. I think that is a good way to go.
Sure.
Well, the whole thing with the home is like, with me, I do the Sabbath with my children. We've got songs, we've got things like that we do, which are repetitive. And so they have a bit of Hebrew, they're going to have a little bit of it, because these are sort of rituals that happen in the home that we can do and repeat and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Not making them fluent yet. They need a couple of years in Israel or something like that for that. But the idea is there, the seed is there, and the love of language is there. Like my son's fluent in German now. We just decided I want to learn German. Good. Yeah, he did that. Because the other thing is, and you probably would pick this up too, it's like language is not just, it's communication, obviously, but it's a window into the past. It's a window into the soul of a people. Like certain words get used, like the more biblical Hebrew made sense to me, like in the beginning. No, a beginning. A beginning? What's that mean? I still haven't answered that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. You know what I mean? There all these little things that sort of, of course it would have been, like, of course that's the way we lived back then. That's why they're using that term. but the English translation is sort of contemporizing, or it's like it's it doesn't want to give a history lesson. It just wants to get through the sentence in the translation. So it's going to sort of miss things that you pick up in the
Mhm.
original,
100%.
things
Yeah.
like that.
Hence the the truth in that term. Lost in translation.
Yeah.
It literally is. I mean, I found since learning Te Reo Māori that I start most mornings, which every morning now I've developed a discipline of reading Te Pai Pira Tapu. So when I read the scriptures in the morning, I now read them in Te Reo Māori, not in English. One of the one of the the many things I've found from that is that, and I actually spoke about this in my maiden speech a couple of years ago in Parliament, is that it's these scriptures that I was raised on in my own family home, and I know reasonably well because of that. It's brought them newly alive. There's fresh things that I see in these same scriptures because they're in another language, and then also I then see, having read them in Te Reo Māori, I then see how many of these scriptures have been incorporated into Maori language, Maori metaphors, and Maori stories, because of course that Christian gospel so shaped Maori society from the mid 1830s through till the end of the 19th century. Mm.
Yeah. No,
Mm.
that's fascinating. I mean, the thing with Hebrew I found is that there's a lot of puns.
Right. Yes.
It's quite a playful language in that way. So there's a lot of plays on words and things, and it's like it's just a bit, and that gets flattened out a
Mm.
bit in translations. But we had James Lindsay here recently, and he was talking about this sort of communist word that was used. It was a German word, and the German communists would use, and it meant to uplift while tearing something apart. So uplifting a system while sort of ripping it to bits and destroying that system. And it's like, wow, in English, we'd need a paragraph
Yeah.
for that.
100%. Yeah. Totally. Which is what.
They've got one
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
how specific and
Excellent,
strange.
brilliant. What's you start to see this, saying like in terms of our in terms of our the English language, the number of words that we bring in, like Schadenfreude, like trying to describe, there is, I mean, we have masochism, we have sadism, but Schadenfreude it's a playful term, and you're not genuinely delighting in someone else's suffering, but you are
Mm.
taking a sort of an amusing pleasure at someone's discomfort.
Oh, sometimes I
Okay,
am.
yeah, okay. A fine line between that and sadism. But we do this, and it's interestingly in terms of the revitalisation of Te Reo Māori as well. Is this is again something I've been following quite closely for a few years now, around both some people loving the way that we're incorporating kupu Māori, so Māori words into English, and other people because they're saying, this is the naturalization of it, and I'm probably more in that camp, but then others who say, well, actually, that's the way that historically existing languages have stopped to exist as separate entities, and
They're
yeah,
swallowed
correct. In
by
other words,
another
this is the
language. Yeah.
evolution of language, and we don't want that evolution to happen because we don't want to lose Māori as a distinct language. And I do hear that. The reality of it is that I genuinely think we can do both. And so I love it when I hear non-Māori speakers using terms like, mahi and tautoko, and whakaaro and whānau and all that. And I say, look, bring it on, do more and more of it. But at the same time, don't pretend that that's the language regeneration pathway. We need
Yeah, that you're now a
yeah,
speaker.
correct. But what it
Yeah,
is
yeah.
it's growing a real distinctive of living in this land and drawing from that language. Yeah. Mm.
Oh, great. Well, we'll be going a while, so
Yeah.
I think we can call it a
Thanks,
day.
Dave.
But yeah, no. So I'll just do my little sign off. So yeah, well, thank you, Greg. This was really good. I think it's a positive conversation to have, and it's been really good to get your journey and your story on all this. If you have any questions for us, do send them in at podcast@fsu.nz. we'd love your feedback on all of this stuff and to keep the conversation going. Yeah, so well, maybe there's I'm and you can even send people our way if you want, Greg, who might want to speak to this, different aspects on the language and everything like that. I think it's a fascinating topic and one that we really want to keep talking about. So thank you for tuning in, and we will see you all next time on Free to Speak.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you for listening to Free to Speak. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and consider sharing the podcast with others. We release new episodes regularly, and subscribing is the easiest way to stay up to date. If you have any questions, feedback or suggestions, you can contact us at podcast@fsu.nz. If you want to find out more about the New Zealand Free Speech Union, visit fsu.nz.